Hi, I'm Jenny Sawyer with the City of Fort Collins, here today to do a brief presentation on our voter-approved Keep Fort Collins Great Tax. This is a 0.85% dedicated tax that was passed by voters in 2010 and was implemented in 2011. It's going to expire in December of 31st, 2020, and so well in advance of that, the city wants to reach out and educate and engage our public. So, as you can see here, the city has multiple taxes. We have a base rate sales tax of 2.25%. That has not changed in 36 years, in 1982 when 2.25 came to be. On top of that, we have 3 quarter-cent taxes that the community is pretty familiar with: street maintenance, our capital improvement tax, and of course our open space tax. And then lastly, the Keep Fort Collins Great Tax, 0.85%, 10-year tax, getting ready to expire. All those taxes together come to a local tax base rate of 3.85%. This is a graphic representation of what that other slide just said. Those bottom 3 bars are the 2.25%. Those were all done pre-TABOR, Taxpayer Bill of Rights. After that time frame, every vote had to go to the community. This slide is important because I think it shows a long history of support from the Fort Collins community to support the things they want. By having these dedicated taxes, and most of those are either community enhancements or street and pavement maintenance, and then again the open space tax, it really allows for accountability. Voters trust us to take this money and then we come back and say, here's what we did, and then we ask again for particular amenities. So we have a long history of that in this community. So why taxes? City of Fort Collins and really most Colorado communities, we are really limited in our revenues by either taxes or fees. These taxes and fees are important because they are our main revenue generator for our general fund base and our operating revenues. This is more detail of that tax slide. The City of Fort Collins does get property tax, and I know people have seen an increase in their property tax. The city gets 11% of the overall property tax, and that equates to 14% of our entire tax pie there. It's important to note that of that, 67% of the property tax that the city receives, we give to the Poudre Fire Authority to support their fire operations. So that's the tax detail. This slide shows within our operations where both general fund dollars go and where those Keep Fort Collins Great taxes go. This is a small detail slide, so I am going to move on. But the orange bars are really where we're looking that we spend Keep Fort Collins Great dollars. One last sort of data slide to present is this cost of government slide. So our cost of government is about 5.5 cents for every dollar earned for citizens in this community. That amount has gone down and remained flat over the last many years, and that's an important measure that we try to keep track of to ensure that we're not raising the cost of government on our citizens. If we look regionally at taxes and where we stand, you'll note in the slide Fort Collins has the lowest base rate tax, that 2.25% that hasn't changed in 36 years. But you'll also note we have the highest dedicated tax, and again, that shows our community support. The larger communities, Boulder, Denver, Colorado Springs, on the far right-hand side, you'll see other taxes. That 1% is regional transportation, so either RTD or Pikes Peak. It's important to note that Fort Collins is supporting all of our transit operations out of our general fund, and that amount comes to almost a whole 0.25% out of that 2.25. So where does Keep Fort Collins Great go? By voter approval, Keep Fort Collins Great is divided amongst these areas: street maintenance, transportation, parks and recreation, police, fire, and other community priorities. Those dollar amounts to the right are the amount of dollars that those areas have received from 2011 all the way through the end of 2018 that we've budgeted through. If people are wondering about the accountability and where has that money gone, every year we create a spending report and you can actually see where every dollar has gone. And that is noted at that web address at the bottom of this page. So a lot of times once I show that, people say, well, what is other transportation? So on this slide, you're going to see this is not meant to be all-inclusive. It's not at all. But these give you some idea of what we're talking about when we say other transportation or when we talk about parks and recreation, where those dollars have gone. The last area we talked about was other community priorities. This fund has really allowed the city to be responsive to community needs and emerging trends that we may not have seen coming in 2010. So you'll see a lot of these dollars going to issues to address homelessness, daytime downtown police service, and supporting our human service organizations. There's a lot of stuff in here, but it gives a general idea of some of those projects and where that money has gone. So as we reach out and we know that 2020 is coming, we want to come to the community and really ask, do we want to replace Keep Fort Collins Great revenue? And do we want to replace it in the full amounts? And if we do, we can do that in a variety of ways, including raising our base rate tax. Advantage there, well, depending on your perspective, one thing to note about the base rate increase is that it's in perpetuity. That would not go back to the voters. It also allows more flexibility in funds. We can also do another dedicated tax, either a conglomerate, as Keep Fort Collins Great is now, with those particular funds in there, or a singular dedicated tax to go towards something specific the community supports. Council has given two main directions, one being we're certainly not looking for any kind of tax increase. 0.85 would be the most that we would be looking to renew, and also that we don't tax groceries. Right now, groceries are only taxed at the 2.25%, and we would not be looking for any additional tax on those groceries. This is a lot to take in, so we've created 3 basic scenarios for people to react to. I realize these 3 scenarios all assume that we're going to replace KFCG in full. Of course, options include not increasing at the full amount. That just results in having to address a reduction in service. If you look at this slide, the top green bar, that's really our current state today with the 2.25 base rate, 3/4 cent taxes, and the 0.85 dedicated. Keep Fort Collins Great, we could just ask for a straight across renewal exactly as it is today. If people like the service they're receiving at the price that they're given now, we can renew and continue to do the same work. Option B shows a 0.6 increase to the base rate. This was chosen for 2 reasons. 1.6 almost covers the entirety of streets, police, and fire and what they're getting in the current Keep Fort Collins Great. That number also leaves a 1/4 cent as a dedicated tax, and our community has become very used to a 1/4 cent tax. We have those 3 others. So one scenario would be increasing the base rate and then doing another dedicated tax, which could be for whatever the community thinks most valuable. Maybe transit, maybe safety specifically, maybe for parks and recreation to help maintain our parks. The last scenario shows putting the full 0.85% into the base rate. So moving forward, we will be going back to council. The next meeting is in December. If we're looking to put this on a ballot, right now we're thinking that would be in April of 2019. That's our next local election. And if we do that, that ballot language would need to be finalized and referred to ballot no later than February 5th of 2019. So that's the basics. If people have additional questions, just a few more data points to consider. This slide shows average annual growth rate of 3 measures. The first one being our population. I think everyone here realizes our population has grown, and it grows at about 1.7% since 2001 through 2017. The next measure is CPI, that's the Consumer Price Index or inflation, and you see that over that same time period it's growing at 2%. And then the bottom line is our general fund at the city, which has also grown by 2.31%. Now, people would say to really be keeping up with what we're seeing, that our general fund growth should actually be the total of the population in the CPI, so over 3%. So we're sort of at this nexus of needing to replace these funds in order to maintain the level of service. One other thing that folks might find interesting, the city organization has grown over time. We've grown with the population. You see that in 2008 and in 2018, we are at about 8.5 employees per 1,000 in the community. And PFA the same. They have maintained steady numbers. One other thing that's important to know that Keep Fort Collins Great pays for are full-time employees, FTEs. If you look at the slide on the left, those are classified full-time employees, and it's maybe hard to read, but the important thing to note here, The light green color on the bottom, those are police service employees. The green bar on top of that, those are Poudre Fire employees. So a significant amount of Keep Fort Collins Great dollars are going to pay for these core fire and police service officers. This is part of the reason it makes it hard to say what would go away if Keep Fort Collins Great is not renewed or not renewed in full, because chances are we're not going to lose all those safety employees. So those reductions would have to come somewhere else, and that would be determined in a next budget cycle. On the right-hand side of the screen, those are hourly FTEs. Those light green bars, those are all Parks and Recreation employees, so doing park maintenance and providing the majority of our recreation programming. This slide shows our pavement management index. So we grade our streets on a classic A to F scale, and we shoot to have our streets always be at a B level. And this graph shows our B level service with Keep Fort Collins Great, and the red bar going down shows what would happen if we did not have the Keep Fort Collins Great dollars. You also see on there that we have done many bridge replacements over the last 8 years utilizing these funds as well, also critical infrastructure. Other transportation, we see a lot of different things here. These are just a few small examples, including updating our bus stops to make them ADA accessible, as well as providing transport rides for over 20,000 of our disabled residents in 2017. Police services, we've talked a little bit about with daytime downtown enforcement going on. We've also been able to open the Campus West Connection units. Those additional police officers that we saw hired in that other slide, police services would be responding to the same number of calls with that many fewer officers. Parks and Recreation, we do know we have 4 neighborhood parks right now that are completely maintained and operated due to Keep Fort Collins Great dollars. Without those, we would really have to look at reductions or possibly not opening those parks. Other community priorities, we talked about being able to address emerging trends and needs. That includes everything from our West Nile virus program and support for education there, as well as our Timberline Recycling Center and coordinating our citywide volunteer program. Those volunteers are amazing. They provide almost the equivalent of 100 full-time employees to the city. And of course, Poudre Fire Authority. We talked about having the equivalent of about 12 firefighters, which is really the equivalent of staffing one entire station. So in conclusion, our questions to the public regarding the sunset of Keep Fort Collins Great are really, should we renew that revenue? Should we renew it in full or at a different amount? And if we do renew at some level, should that come by an increase to the base rate or through a dedicated tax? And if a dedicated tax, what should that dedicated tax be for? So thank you, and for information and to stay up to date on our outreach efforts and where we're going, please visit fcgov.com/KFCG.